Okay, look, I know you've seen a lot of conversations about AI and conversations about AI and art. I want you to listen to this one. And the reason I want you to listen to this one is because I think where we got to, we had Kate Lindsay on, and then we had Joshua Rothman on and Niko Stratis. And the thing that we talked about left me actually feeling quite optimistic about this idea that even though there's so much AI in art, when it comes to music, when it comes to movies, etc., yes, that is true. However, there is something happening. There's something brewing where the things that we're reacting to, the things that you and I are reacting to, are the things that are made by real people. And even the things that are made by AI that actually are taking off, they have a bit more of that human touch in there than you would actually expect. So I went into this conversation feeling a little like, I don't know what to do with AI. I'm a little bit exhausted by all these conversations. And I left this conversation feeling quite hopeful. I hope that you do too. Have a watch. Hello, everybody. How y'all doing?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, it's nice to have you here. I'm delighted that you're here. I have a lot of questions, beginning with, okay, let's set the table, Josh, with you, because you wrote this piece for the New Yorker a few months back, and I think it's sort of maybe like good grounding for us to get into this. How pervasive is AI right now in the art and the culture that we consume?
Well, that's a good question because it's hard to say, right? Because it's a little bit, I mean, the whole point is that it looks and talks and sounds like real people. The way I guess the way I try to think about it is I feel like there's like three layers to that. One layer is a lot of the way we find cultural stuff is already AI powered. So there's that layer. You know, that's kind of like your friends who would recommend stuff to you have been replaced by AI. Then there's another layer, which is AI generated aspects of things getting like woven in to the stuff that you are experiencing. So that could be like a scene in a film, or it could be an instrument on a song that you're listening to, or it could be a shot in a YouTube video that was like too expensive for the YouTube creator to do for real, but they used AI. And that layer is definitely, you know, everywhere. And then there's a thing which is, you know, soup to nuts. It's totally AI from beginning to end. And you know, my sense is it depends what modality you're in. If you're reading an article on the internet, that's, you know, if you're just Googling for stuff, it's not unlikely that you're going to read something that's written, generated totally. On an online forum, I think if you're a forum haunter like me, you know, you start to read a lot of stuff that kind of seems like maybe it was an AI.
Yeah.
And you know, now there are songs that people are listening to that are AI. So it's not everywhere. It's not inescapable, but the trend is pretty unmistakable.
Are we at a place where we can tell whether something's AI or not, Josh?
I think like in some ways you can still tell for sure, but the technology keeps getting better. So the quantity, you know, the ease with which that's going to happen is going to decrease. Maybe there's some like human spidey sense that tells you this is weird. And that's kind of our biggest hope.
I mean, I would like to believe in that spidey sense, Niko. Like, I genuinely would like to believe that because it's estimated that about 34 million new images are generated by AI every day. And I would like to believe, I'd like to move through the world believing that I, a human being, have something in me that goes, I don't think that thing is real. Can you tell what's real and what's not anymore, Niko?
I like to think that I can, and maybe this is me being like I'm a detective, and this is my like special skill. Like, you know, every detective on TV has like one thing they're really good at, and maybe mine is like I can tell if something is AI. But I think that there's like a touch of the soul that seeps into the page, and I think if something is generated without that, I think there's a noticeable lack of it. You know, I look through a lot of those, like you see those subreddits that are always like, is this AI? And I see a lot of people are getting better and better at it. I think the more pervasive it's become, I think people are starting to become aware of the tells, especially, you know, with cartoon images. It's clear because it's sort of flat and there's a sheen and it kind of feels like nothing. And then, you know, like with AI generated, say, scripts in a Google response or what have you, I think we're starting to see more and more, okay, the cracks are showing in this because the technology is good but not great, and again, like it's not being made by a human at all. And I think this, you know, there's sort of a failure to sort of generate any kind of realness that we know, like something that feels almost tangible even though it's on the screen or what have you. And you know, so I think I can always tell. It's getting harder because the technology is getting quote unquote better, but 9 times out of 10 I can always tell, like, okay, this is fake.
Niko, what I love about you is that we are both Pollyanna-ish in the same way. And so like this
Yeah,
idea
sure.
of, a touch of the soul reaches the page is like, I would like to also believe that. I'm not entirely sure whether that's true or whether it's somebody who's programming AI models right now to go, and how can a touch of the soul also reach the page? But Kate, like, let's get into this, because you report on the internet. What's your sense of how pervasive AI is right now, and just in terms of the content that we're getting? And I'm not just talking about like the Sora videos and the TikTok videos, but like just more broadly, the ways that it's just being used as a tool across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that took me a while to sort of conceptualize, and this is something that Joshua touched on a bit, is the idea that AI, there's generative AI, which is when we have Chat GPT or Sora, but AI as a whole has existed for a long time, and it does a lot of the unglamorous stuff. Like I would say I don't use AI except for whenever I do transcribe an interview. I use a service that, it uses AI. It's a robot who does it. And so when we're looking online, this is something Mr. Beast actually walked back, but like he's just one person in this tool that helps create YouTube thumbnails, and it's AI, and it pulls it from your video. I mean, Substack does this too. So there's a lot of ways that the tools are used to like shorten those like administrative processes. But then when it comes to actually consuming and scrolling the feed, it's really hard to tell. And what I'd say more so is we just don't trust anything. Because I would say the only ways, and again, I'm in a bubble as someone who's not interested in consuming AI content, but on places like Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, there is a little disclosure that comes up that in some cases you have to put yourself, like, okay, I have to say that this was made with AI, so that comes down to like, do we trust people to do that?
Yeah.
But then when it comes also, there is like a watchdog type thing of like, anytime I open the comments of a video on TikTok, and the video was made by AI, people are making sure everyone knows that, like, this is AI. And so right now it's very much a crowdsourced type of,
like a self-policing mechanism.
Right. It's like the honesty system, which I don't believe people will use. And so then there's this crowdsourcing. But then again, it's like, how do they know? Is it just a spidey sense? Because I'll read and have people say like, oh, this video is AI. And now that they've said that, I'm like, oh, yeah, it definitely is. But I don't think I would have thought that if I hadn't read that first.
I will say, like, cards on the table, I think I come at this from like the alarmist corner, Joshua. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I'm trying to leave that corner. I'm actually like genuinely trying to go like, how do I leave this place? And I want to get into some specifics, and maybe let's start with film here. So back in 2023, DreamWorks founder Jeffrey Katzenberg said AI is going to cut the cost of animated film by 90%. And then this year, you get this story about how Disney licensed some of its biggest animated movies to OpenAI, so that now you can make like Sora videos with some of those iconic kind of characters. But in the piece that you reported for The New Yorker, you actually talked with some filmmakers who were really optimistic. Where does that come from? Like, where does that optimism come from? These people make films. I treat films as sacred. I'm being an alarmist. I'll let you talk.
Yeah, I mean, so part of when I was writing that piece, I'm a heavy AI user. I mean, partly because I write about technology, and I'm just curious. And I really wanted, in doing that piece, not to talk only to people who have built careers without AI, as it were, and who don't like it, but I wanted to talk to people who are in the career building phase. So in that piece, like, some of the folks I talked to these three guys. They make an AI sketch comedy YouTube thing called AI or Die, which is like a crazy surreal thing. It's awesome. And these were three people who had basically gone to film school. They'd made some films through the traditional route, which is incredibly time consuming and incredibly expensive. The biggest issue is you have to secure funding. You have to convince all these people to pay you in advance to make something. And they had found the AI tools like quite liberating, in the sense that now they could none of them were filmmakers anymore. They'd left the industry, but they could make things. And I thought the most surprising thing to me was the stuff they were making was extremely AI in its aesthetic. So it looked like AI. It embraced the weirdness and artificiality and glitchiness. But one of them said, he was just waiting for the tools to get so good that he could just make a normal movie. Like, that was his goal, just make a normal movie. So, the thing is about all this is it's an upside and a downside. And it's sort of, maybe it depends on where you are located in the ecosystem. for some people, clearly it's a downside, and for other people, there's an opportunity. And we all come at it from different locations.
I guess if we take that concept that Niko introduced, this idea of the touch of the soul reaching the page, or in this particular case, a sketch, like talking about the downside of AI sort of being used so often in industries, as you should get like filmmakers who you say have left the industry as far as they can, they characterize it, and they say this is the thing that we're doing now. What's the downside of that?
Well, the biggest downside, I think, is, to exactly articulate the upside, it's that it allows for a certain kind of a tourist way of doing things where individuals can make stuff. But then the flip side of that, which is the bad thing, well, it's one of many bad things, but it risks hollowing out the scene and the ecosystem of artists.
Yeah.
And art culture comes from a scene. It's not just from individuals, and it's not just about the individual art product or whatever. It's about a group of people who have a culture together, who work together, who have values and bounce off each other. And the idea that we're going to move to a world where there's basically just fewer, you don't need that anymore. And maybe you don't have to engage in it. I don't know whether that will happen, but that doesn't seem so great.
That's a thing that like it hits me in my heart, and I go like, oh, that feels like it has a really heavy consequence. So I want to return to that later. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Niko Stratis is here, Kate Lindsay's here, and Joshua Rothman is here, and we're talking about whether 2026 is going to be a year of reset when it comes to cultural reset when it comes to AI. And I want you to have a listen to this.
They said, slow down, boy, don't go too fast. But I ain't never been one to live in the past. I keep moving forward, never looking back, with a worn-out hat and a 6-string Strat. You can kick rocks if you don't.
Well, all right. Here's the thing about this song, Niko, and I'm uncomfortable to tell you this, is that this song reached #1 on one of the Billboard digital charts. It wasn't the big country chart by any stretch, but it was one of the bigger sort of digital charts that Billboard has. It's called Walk My Walk by Breaking Rust, and it is 100% made by AI. The entire thing it's not a real song. It's a song that was entirely created by AI. How do you think AI changed the thing that we want, shall we say, from music, from film, from poetry? How does it change what we want from art?
I think it reinforces this idea that we want art to be made by somebody. We want there to be some craft of some kind. Like if you really want to expand on it and really look at it really hard and really sort of dig into it, it is also kind of a labor issue. And it's not even kind of, it is a labor issue. When we talk about AI is doing the unglamorous work, well, the unglamorous work used to be done by people. I have look, partially this is my bias because I worked in trades long before I ever did creative work. And a lot of the work that people that have the upbringing that I do is quote unquote unglamorous work. It is the work that builds a thing, and it ultimately builds a product or a door or whatever that you can look at and see like, this is pleasing to me. And I think that with art, like hearing that song, you can tell that nobody physically made a thing. Nobody made a thing. It just sort of exists out of nowhere. It's listened to by no one, and it climbs a chart that no one cares about. Is it real? It is like telling me that a McDonald's wrapper is running for president. Like, it's not real. It doesn't matter. This is a thing that sort of exists in the ether. And I think that more and more people are starting to feel this call for, okay, well, we want something that feels real, that has some sort of tangible element. You're seeing younger people engage in analog technology more and more now because they want to, partially, I feel like they want to have some semblance of the world, because otherwise the world doesn't really exist. It is just a digital flat thing that's maybe real and potentially not. And it kind of feels like nothing. And more than ever, if there's one thing I think we took away from 2025 is people wanting to hold on to the idea that the world around them is real in some way, that they can hold it. And I hope that moving into this year, we are sort of asking more and more, how do we make sure that the world is real, that there's blood here, that we could feel sort of coursing through it. And when I hear that song, I think it is dry. There's no blood in those veins.
No, well, the problem, here's the problem, Kate. The problem that I have with that is that there's a lot of music that doesn't feel like there's a lot of blood coursing through it in general. And I guess like that's the part that I struggle with is we say that song was made by AI, and it was, but that meant that someone sat down and said, what I would like out of this machine is to create a country song that feels like this. And there was a human somewhere along the way that said, I don't want to do the work of learning how to sing. I don't want to do the work of learning these instruments. I don't want to do do the work of songwriting. What I want is a facsimile of all those things, enough that you can create the song, and then sure enough, you get that, and then it goes, to the top of that particular chart. AI is changing our value systems. And one of the things that is changing is I feel like people are a little bit less hesitant to say that's good or that's bad. They're just a little bit closer to being like, I either vibe with that or I don't. And I'm curious from your perspective, like what place does authenticity have as in this entire conversation of how we evaluate art in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, AI in many ways is just like the final boss of a path we've been going down for a while, which is like, it said like what you're explaining is how can we make something, how can we cut corners to make something for the largest audience? AI is sort of the epitome of being able to do that, but that's been happening for a while. Like you said, there has been music where it's like, there's no, oh my gosh, sorry, I moved my whole desk.
No worries.
There has been music that's felt like it's had no soul in it for a while, and you can argue many ways why. And so in that sense, this feeling isn't new. It's kind of reached a tipping point. And so then when it comes to authenticity, I mean, I found explaining this is like trying to explain the color blue. Like, it's like you're kind of explaining just like a thing that's like a human truth. But, there's a reason that knitters, like I'm a knitter, there's a reason I'm knitting a sweater that I could go and buy in one day. Like that sweater means more. Or like there's a reason you put your kid's art up on the wall, even though it's not Picasso.
Yeah.
Or, even when it comes to social media, we post on social media to share our lives and to connect with people. And all of those, the reason all of those things are interesting is because of like the human meaning behind them. And I think perhaps AI, again, as like the most extreme version of cutting corners, just giving people essentially slop. You feel that. And suddenly when it feels like every TV show you put on has been like manufactured to appeal to the broadest possible audience, or the music you listen to is just getting churned out without really any thought for the art, and perhaps it's AI. Suddenly, I mean, it always felt, when I knit a sweater and I wear it, that always felt meaningful, but now it feels almost like a rebellion to do it.
Yeah.
And so I really do feel, again, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm being optimistic, but that all this is doing is emphasizing and maybe reminding people of that feeling, because I have not necessarily felt in terms of culture that people are like flocking to AI and are thinking that the feeling of authenticity isn't worth it anymore. If anything, I feel like it's become even more important.
Well, I think like I take that point seriously, because to me, the thing that I'm often looking for is the artist who feels like they're talking to one person.
Mm-hmm.
And like the more that I feel you trying to sort of like sand your edges down in order to be able to just appeal to the widest number of people, the more there's kind of have a reaction of like, well, what are we even doing this for? Like literally, who are you actually trying to talk to? Because it didn't feel like you're trying to talk to anybody. And I like that conception of AI being the sort of final boss of this. But Joshua, you had this great line in the piece that you wrote. You said AI is coming for culture, but culture may be stranger, bigger, and more fundamentally human than we know. Maybe, ironically, AI will put its value into sharp relief. That feels like it's in conversation with the thing that Kate just said, this conception of like the more that we get more of these sort of like larger appealing things, the more likely we are to react to these like sort of really small kind of intimate moments. How do you see that unfolding this year?
I guess the way I've been trying to think about it is, I think a lot of what makes culture good, there's two things. This is a total generalization.
Right.
There's creative minds and there's real life. AI doesn't have a creative mind. It's basically a pastiche machine,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not alive. It doesn't live a life. Now, that doesn't mean that AI tools can't be used by real people living real lives to make interesting art. That's totally possible. I think those three guys I talked about before, what they make is so weird. Only people could have come up with that. And it's driven by their desires, their values, what they vibe with. It's driven by that.
Yeah.
And it's really, really different from an incredibly generic sounding song that's basically ripping off songs that have already been recorded.
Yeah.
That is just the kind of median of already existing art. So I think what's going to happen is the path of making generic stuff with a simple prompt using AI tools is going to turn out to be pretty fruitless. And the path of using AI to make things that haven't been made before, which is way harder. That's something that you need artists to do. That's something that could turn into something, and we're going to find out. But I don't think we're going to discover that that things that aren't alive, that don't live lives and don't have minds, can make art. That doesn't make sense to me.
That's the most optimistic thing I've heard about AI in the last 2 years, I promise. But also I'm interested in that because are you seeing that, Josh? Are you seeing this reaction to people who are like having a broad refusal to say, I don't want to engage with this. This feels like empty slop. I don't want it. Or do you think that we're going to build that resistance as we go?
I think a lot of us, I mean, I can speak just personally. I'm interested in AI. I want to see interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You just keep seeing the same thing over and over because, this is true not just in artistic context, but it's true with all the other things people are using AI for. It's only as good as what you ask it to do.
Right.
It's fundamentally, weirdly, a human-driven technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how much you prompt it. And a lot of the AI stuff out there is lazy, basically. It's basically an experiment. It's like a tech demo. We're all just messing around. I don't think we've really reached the phase in this story. I mean, you started by saying, just 3 years ago that ChatGPT came into existence. I don't think we've reached the story where people are really putting in the type of effort that could possibly result in interesting AI outcomes. And will that ever happen? That remains kind of unknown.
Yeah, the example that I keep thinking about is like, there's all these AI sort of attempts at recreating like a Lynchian atmosphere, and the real challenge becomes actually what does it look like if David Lynch was around and he was the person who was going to start a David Lynch-like figure who was able to use these AI tools to create something new. Then we're cooking. Then we're sort of like, okay, we're maybe in a slightly different realm. Niko, I wanted to take a moment to talk about the fact that like this year we've talked so much about protecting Canadian culture in the context of Donald Trump, but we have not really talked about protecting culture from AI quite as much. What should the government be doing? Like, what tools do you think they have at their disposals, or what kind of ideas should they be protecting?
What should the government do about art is a very funny, do I have 3 hours?
No.
I think there should be protections in place. We've seen this a lot with a lot of, especially look at voice actors, especially in, we've seen a lot of union battles against this because there is, this sort of AI proliferation throughout there. And we're seeing a lot of this. There should be protections for artists. There should be support for artists.
Yeah.
I am an AI skeptic. I am of an ilk that doesn't believe that AI can or should be used to create art at all. So, I have seen conversations where people say oh, well, I want to be able to apply for a grant to use AI. I don't think that should be allowed, but I am very much on the other side of the fence, right?
Yeah.
Where I don't think even somebody very creatively using a prompt, I still don't think they're making art. At the end of the day, I don't believe that to be art, because you're not actually making anything. You're just asking a computer to make a thing that you don't have the skills to do. And part of making art is gaining the skills to make a thing, whether you're good at prompting or not. It sort of feels irrelevant. And I think that we do need to have more conversations about protections for artists that are creating art, that are practicing their skills, that are doing these things. If you want to look at it as art as a capitalist enterprise, you can look at, what does art do for a culture? This is a thing we've been talking about a lot within Canada. Well, what is our cultural identity? And part of that is what are Canadians making, not what are Canadians asking a computer to make. So, it is a harder conversation that I think we are still going to be fighting for a long time to come as these technologies get, bigger and more well-funded, and all of these ideas are more sort of pushed into daily lives. But it's complicated because what's government role in art is inherently a loaded conversation.
But also just the idea of what are Canadians asking computers to make you're never going to see that question on the cover of Maclean's anytime soon. And so I like that as a sort of general frame. Kay, I'm going to give you the last word on this. I alluded to this idea that people are craving authenticity in their culture. Are we seeing actual signs that we're actually in for some kind of cultural reckoning? Got about a minute left here.
Yeah, I mean, so we can look at sort of both ends of it, because obviously there's the backlash to it in the sense that, we saw this was in New York, but the ads for this AI tool called Friend AI that was basically like a person you wear, but it's an AI and it's supposed to be your friend. They were widely defaced and graffitied, and all the sentiments were like, make real friends, this is surveillance, like really huge backlash. Or even something like Tilly Norwood, the AI actress. I don't think anyone who's an actual movie-going person saw that and was like, yes, can't wait to see her, it. But then you look at what are people getting excited about, and none of it's AI. Like, you know, the thing that everyone's excited about right now, and it's Canadian, is Heated Rivalry, which is an original story with new actors. Like, you know, none of that is made on, like, you know, a small budget to try, and then it just, but people really resonated with, again, the authenticity of it. And so I think, what are people getting excited about? It's not, at least not right now. It's not AI, and I don't see that changing. And so, like, that's what I think we have to be optimistic about.
I love this optimistic note to end on. I appreciate your time. You guys are wonderful. Thanks again so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Of course, Joshua Rothman, Niko Stratis, and Kate Lindsay. My name is Elamin. This is Commotion. We'll see you tomorrow.